Okay. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Express Payment Options Workshop. Um, we are going to get started right now. And before we get started, a couple of things. As we mentioned, but if you're just joining, you probably didn't hear me rant about this, but we are going to be recording this. I'm recording it right now. So we're going to share with everyone that RSVP'd or is attending right now. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about this in a little bit as well, but there's gonna be a lot covered in this workshop. So definitely keep that in mind. The recording is gonna be your friend. You definitely wanna check that out afterwards when you can kind of go through things step by step in case you want that play-by-play. So just keep that in mind. If you haven't already, feel free to share into the chat a little bit about who you are so we can all get acquainted with each other. The other thing too is there will be a chunk of time for Q&A. So we're happy to, in that time kind of go over sections again if you'd like. But we really just ask that you kind of keep any questions that you have as general as you possibly can. As much as we would love to be able to answer everyone's specific questions relating to your theme or your website and getting express payments options turned on, that can be kind of difficult with so many people here. So feel free to put questions into the chat as they come. We may not be able to answer them live while we're going through it, but we'll definitely make sure that we save them for the end. And then that will really be the time that we can kind of dive into things. Okay, so who are we? So my name is Katie. I am the manager of the customer onboarding and engagement team here. I am based in Boston. I've been NationBuilder for about 3 years now, and my lovely co-host Lauren is here with me. Hello, Lauren.
Hey all, I am Lauren. I'm the product manager for the group that was working on the express payment options feature. I'm based out of California and excited to be with you all today.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, what you can expect out of today. So what we're covering. So we are going to be covering what are express payment options. If you don't know already, and then that's why you're here, and don't have no fear, that's what we'll be covering, as well as how you can turn this on. We'll definitely want to make sure you do that first and foremost. But there's also the big chunk of this workshop is going to be these 2 bullet points, the types of theme updates and how to update your custom theme. And then, as I mentioned, Q&A. So keep that in mind, and that's what you can expect out of today. So what are express payment options? And why do I want it? So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see a little screenshot of what this looks like. So express payment options is basically just a faster donor experience that allows your donor to have their information already pulled in and pre-filled out for them, essentially. So it's mobile friendly. Everything's mobile nowadays. So, not having to kind of click through and kind of go into the tabs and kind of fill out all your information makes it mobile optimized. As you can imagine, it's less time that your donors have to fill in doing manual work to get up and get their credit card and all of those things. So it kind of removes some barriers to entry to donate. So those are some of the things that we're excited about, among many other things about this option. Other thing is, how does it work? So as you can see on the screenshot on the right, so you'll see like a pay with, and you'll see like Google Pay spelled out there. So it depends on which browser folks are using. So Apple Pay for Safari, Google Pay for on Chrome, and Pay Now on Microsoft Edge is how which button will actually show up for them. So just keep that in mind, that it will depend on that. There isn't anything for Firefox, but keep in mind that these are the most common browser types. Okay, so what do you need to get started? 2 things, a NationBuilder payments account and a donation V2 page. So on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the screenshots I took of like the steps that it takes to actually get a NationBuilder payments account. Super easy. You log into your Nation and you go to settings. From there, you'll see a tab that'll say payment processors. So you'll go ahead and click on that. Then there will be a button in the top right-hand corner for new processor, which will bring you to the last screen at the bottom that says set up a new account. Once you click that, it'll open a new tab And that's where you'll fill out your bank information and all of that business information, all that good stuff. And then your payments account is set up. So very, very easy, takes under 5 minutes. And then you'll need a donation V2 page. So if you are new to creating that payments account in a donation page as a whole, you'll create a new donation page from scratch, and you'll be able to add that payment processor to it. If you've already been using a separate payment processor and you are moving to NationBuilder payments and now want to convert that old donation page into the donation V2 page, there's a really seamless way right into the control panel, where you can just kind of click on the convert tab and it'll convert all your pages for you. If you're curious about that, feel free to put that in the chat and I can drop some support documentation that kind of walks you through that. But that's really it. That's all it takes to get express payment options. So really, really easy to get started before you have that option. So how do I actually turn it on? So, all right, great. I've already taken those steps. I have my payments account. I have my donation V2 page. So now how do I get this? So what you're going to want to do is you want to turn it on. So on the right-hand side, you will see, again, some steps. So you'll click on the website. You may have multiple websites. If so, you'll have to do this for each website. So keep that in mind. But then once you click on the website that you want to turn this on for, you'll be able to go to the site settings, and then there will be a checkbox that says enable express payment options on donation V2 pages. Go ahead and turn that on, and then you're good to go. So one big thing that I'd like to call out is there's a couple of ways that you can actually turn this on. So the last step that I just walked you through is actually showing it off at the site level. So I'm turning this on across my entire site, which basically means that I'm turning it on for all of my donation pages. So it's across my whole site. All of my donation pages now have that functionality into it. But for whatever reason, maybe you actually want to turn it on or off at the certain page level. I don't, there might be a reason why you don't want that on for a certain donation page. So you can turn that off at any time. So the screenshot on the right is showing you like that's where that site settings is. And then once you go in there, that checkbox will be there. And then that arrow is showing you go to the page and the donation page. And then on the left-hand side over here where it says donation settings and then basics, there will be another checkbox where you can turn that off at the individual page level. So keep in mind, that's the two ways that you can turn this on or off if you see fit. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Lauren to talk about types of theme updates.
All right, so depending on how customized your existing website is, you may need to apply some theme updates or some changes to your existing custom theme or existing customized donation V2 pages. So the complexity of this really varies based on your current setup. So we're going to walk through that. And for the folks asking for documentation in the chat, Katie's going to go ahead and share out documentation as we go. Their documentation will also be linked throughout the presentation. So we'll send you these slides after the fact, and you can go ahead and click through on the documentation that's relevant to your particular setup. So to jump right in with the first type of theme update, if you are just starting to use NationBuilder payments or donation V2 pages, or otherwise have a custom theme but no customizations to your page's donation V2 wide file, or if you do have customizations and don't mind overwriting those, it's going to be pretty simple for you to change your theme or update your theme in order to get access to express payment options functionality. So you'll see a small screenshot over on the right-hand side that shows you what it looks like when you do have a customized Pages Show Donation V2 wide file. You'll see that custom badge next to it in the website section under theme. So if you scroll down and you're looking at all of your templates page by page, if you have that custom badge next to this specific theme file, then you are not going to want to follow this particular set of instructions. If you don't, the instructions for you are, as a general overview, to download the new files from that documentation linked there, to upload the Pages Donation V2 wide file into your custom theme and to copy and paste all of the code from the epotheme.scss file into your custom theme and publish those changes. So I know that's a really vague summary. There are step-by-step instructions in that documentation linked at the top. So if this applies to you, highly recommend going to that documentation that Katie just linked here to walk through all the steps in more depth to make sure that you have all the code in your theme that you need. But long story short, you don't need to update any individual lines of code or do anything particularly complex in working with the code if you don't have a customized Pages Donations v2 wide file. The next type of update is if you want to update a particular donation v2 page, but you don't want to or can't change your custom site or your website theme level, don't want to modify your custom theme at the website level. This will also mean that any new donation v2 pages you create will not have express payment options enabled because you'd just be making these modifications to a specific existing page or to a specific new page that you spin up just to use with express payment options. So that's our second bullet there, comfortable removing existing customizations from specific pages. If you have an existing donation v2 page that is customized, you can wipe out those existing customizations and follow these instructions to get express payment options instead. Or again, you can spin up a brand new donation page that won't have your existing customizations and will just use this express payment options code. So for this version of the implementation, similarly, you're going to download those files from the documentation that are relevant to the stock theme that your custom theme was based off of. You're going to copy and paste the epotheme.scss into the page level template for your donation page. So to step back for a beat, you're going to, when you create this new donation page or edit an existing donation page, you're going to wipe out all of the code in the template for that page. So delete all of the template code and instead paste in that epotheme.scss code at the top of the form between style tags, and then paste the Pages Donation v2 wide file code directly below that and publish those changes. Again, this is laid out in much more depth in the documentation, and we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time on these first two options today because they are the more straightforward versions of updating your theme. The version that we are going to spend a bunch of time on today is how to update an already customized donation v2 template. So this is for you if you already have existing customizations at the site or page level to your donation v2 wide file, or again to a particular custom donation page, and you want to retain those customizations while adding the ability to support express payment options. This is the most complicated version because you are going to have to kind of go line by line with the different elements that we had to change to support express payment options to build those into your existing template. So want to add up at the top that there are a couple things we won't be covering in this session. One is how to make updates to a staged donation page. So some of you all might have customized your donation v2 pages already to be staged, meaning that instead of having the native one page donation v2 form, you have steps within your donation page that the donor needs to click through to get to the final stage. We are going to be releasing documentation that kind of covers how you can add express payment options to a staged donation form in the coming weeks here. So keep an eye out for that. But we won't be covering that during this session because it is kind of an additional layer of customizations on top of the customizations that we're going to be talking about today. The other thing we won't be covering is how to identify your custom theme's underlying stock theme. So if you don't know what stock theme your theme was based on, you're not going to know which theme files to download from our documentation, but in each version of our documentation linked here and that Katie's been linking out to in the chat, there is section of instructions for how to identify which stock theme you're using. So again, rely on the documentation for that to figure out which stock theme underlies your custom theme, and that'll be the first step to getting started. So to dive in to the complicated version, how to update your custom theme. So one thing to note that Katie mentioned at the top, we don't recommend trying to follow along with this in real time during the presentation, because there are a lot of changes, and the changes that you make and the lines that you need to add specific code to are going to vary depending on the customizations that you already have to your templates. So instead, what we'd suggest doing is wait for us to send you the recording of this workshop so that you can go through this section and pause where relevant at each stage so that you can follow along that way. The other suggestion we have is that you download the custom files for your relevant theme and you open those up in a text editor. You will need some kind of text editor for code text editor for this. Like I use Atom, it's free. There's also Sublime or a bunch of other options you can find online. So open up the custom code and then have your current theme code open up side by side so that you can follow along with the changes and add the new blocks of code or delete the blocks of code that have been removed section by section as you're walking through your theme. So again, don't suggest doing that right now during the workshop, but once you're following along at home with the recording, keeping those two tabs open side by side to go line by line through the changes. So this section will be walking through the explanation of changes section in the documentation. So that's basically a written version of what we'll be going through verbally here. There's also a file linked in that documentation that's a guide for these changes. And what that is basically a pared down version of a theme file that kind of points out where you'll add and remove specific pieces of code. So again, just kind of a written version of what we'll be going through verbally here through these next 6 steps. There's also a screenshot on this slide you'll see of the find section at the top of the theme editor. This little find box will be your friend for finding the different sections of code that we'll be talking about today and where you need to add things or remove things. So the first step is to remove the numbering of section headers. You may not have this in your theme. Some of our older themes have a numbering system. So like 1 next to amount, 2 next to your information. So because we're reordering the sections a bit here, we're moving the credit card field up from the bottom of the form up to the top directly under the amount section, which we'll see in a later slide. We want to remove these numbers to keep that consistent. So you'll delete the 1 next to amount, and then you'll see this conditional statement, if request current order 1, else 2, and if in front of your information. You're going to want to delete that entire section because we don't want numbering for regular donations or for tickets. Step 2 is to add the new pay with section. So directly underneath the payment frequency code, so like paid monthly versus paid annually, you're going to want to add the new section. Like I just mentioned, we're adding the credit card field and the payment method selection section up to the top of the form so donors can select credit card or Google Pay, Apple Pay, what have you, before they enter in their information. So you're going to add this in a normal theme, if you don't have customizations here yet, right underneath the frequency section and right above the your information section. So that code looks like a giant block of new text. So again, back to the idea that you're going to have this version of the code that you're going to download from our documentation, side by side with the existing template that you already have. That's going to be really useful here because you're going to want to copy and paste this entire block of code into your existing theme file where we just showed you. So I'm going to briefly walk through what is going on here, what this code is doing, just so you have that context. So the first up, we've renamed the payment information section Pay With. This just makes it clearer that the person is selecting the payment method that they want to pay with versus only having the option to pay by card. But will still work if the person does not have Google Pay, Apple Pay, etc. set up, and they can only see the card field to pay with. This will still look pretty normal, pay with, and then the credit card field. Below that, this is where we give the option to pay with an express payment option or by credit card. So you'll see the conditional code there if page donation V2 express payment option or payment activated. That's what controls displaying this functionality only if the page and site have express payment option enabled. So like Katie showed at the top of the presentation, if the functionality is enabled in those two locations, this will show the express payment option. Once that option has been selected, the donor will see a section that says you're almost done, submit your donation at the bottom of the form. That is to make it clear to the donor that they are going to need to scroll to the bottom of the form after selecting that they're going to pay with Google Pay or Apple Pay or credit card, so that they know that they need to fill out the information, or in the case of Apple Pay or Google Pay, just review that information before they click submit. Last but not least, kind of a new feature that we've added in addition to this functionality is that we are recording that we have sent payment method information over to Stripe. So the NationBuilder payment processor is built on Stripe. And so we are recording that if somebody has entered a credit card or saved or entered their Google Pay or Apple Pay information, and there's an error on the form, say reCAPTCHA gets triggered, or the donor forgets to enter some information pertaining to like their credit card information, instead of refreshing the whole form and forcing the person to re-enter their credit card information or their payment information, we're saving the fact that that's already been sent off to Stripe, so they don't have to go through that extra step of re-adding it. Just to be super clear, NationBuilder is still not storing any donor credit card information on our end. That is all just being passed through, and what we're now storing is the fact that we've passed it through. So that should hopefully reduce friction even when there are errors. And then at the very bottom, you'll see that folks can choose to change their payment method. If they've selected card or Google Pay, they can go back and make a different selection if they choose to do so. All right, so step three. Step three is adding this div with the ID your info just above the existing your information section. So what this does is this div ID dynamically hides the rest of the form if or while the donor is selecting their payment method. So if they haven't selected, say, Apple Pay or credit card yet, they won't see the rest of the form. This makes it a more simplified donor experience. And that way, if they say select Google Pay, we're able to get all of their personal like donation information and their billing address information and pull that for them. Then we can pre-populate that in those blocks that Katie showed earlier that we'll talk about in a second, so that they don't have to refill in that data. The important part of this is once you've added that your info section above your information, you will also need to add a closing div towards the end of the template. This is a little complicated because where exactly this closing div lives depends on your theme. So back to having those two files up side by side as you're going through this, you can count the number of closing divs that you have in the section at the end of the file and just make sure that yours match up with the custom template that you've downloaded. Otherwise, you're also welcome to match the divs top to bottom to make sure that every opening div has a corresponding closing div, but it might be faster to just count the divs in the new file, make sure you have the same number in the same sections. Often it's going to be before this, or it should always be before this end form for section, because the your info div starts within the form for donation. Step 4, the collapsible donor information section. So going back to the idea of having that collapsible donor block so that folks don't have to re-enter information that they already have essentially submitted through Google Pay, Apple Pay, or a saved browser payment method. We want to be able to display the information that we collected from that payment method to the donor and give them the ability to edit that information. If something is wrong with what they've entered, say they have a different email address on file than the one that they have in your nation, or they have a different version of their name perhaps associated with their credit card, they can go ahead and edit this information to make sure that it's consistent with what they want to submit. And you're going to do this by copying and pasting, again, this block of code directly before the your information, or directly at the top of the your information section. So below where you see the your information block in your theme currently, you're going to copy and paste this. Directly below that, you're going to wrap the existing fields from your theme in this demographics info ID. So step number 2 here, you have demographics info ID, similar idea. This is going to allow us to dynamically display these fields based on whether someone submitted or whether someone is trying to pay by credit card. If they pay by credit card, we don't want to show them a block of blank information. We want to show them the regular fields. Or if somebody clicks edit on those fields, we want to be able to open all the fields up and display the fields in full so that they can be editable. So you'll see in step number 3 that I have bolded phone number. That is because in some themes, the phone number field is at the very bottom of the form. And you're going to want to copy and paste that whole section, like starting with the div class row fluid in this case. Copy that from the bottom of your form and pull that up to be right underneath last name. The reason to do this is that the block of text shows email, first name, last name, and phone, because that's what we'll be able to pull from the express payment methods. So if you don't move the phone number up and somebody edits that block of text, say because they want to change their phone number, it'll be a strange donor experience to see that phone number field jump to the bottom of the form for them to edit it. So again, it'll still work if you don't move it, but strongly recommend that you move the phone number field up to live in this block. And then step number 4, make sure you close out that demographics info div at the bottom of this section. Step number 5 should look very familiar. It is the same idea as the demographics info block. So you're going to add a collapsible address information section just below the demographics info block that you just completed. Again, same idea, you're going to copy and paste this all over. This allows donors to edit their address information if it's not correct, or if they want to make any adjustments based on what was pulled from Apple Pay or Google Pay. And then similarly, steps 2 through 4, same idea. You're going to add an ID of address info that makes the fields display dynamically where relevant, so that people can fill out that information if they're paying by card or if they've selected to edit their address information from the previous block. And step number 4 here at the very bottom is just to close that ID div. So again, wrapping all of your pre-existing address code in this address info div. All of this address section, you don't need to copy and paste over. This already exists in your theme as you have it. You'll want to include any customizations you might have pertaining to the address fields within this block to make sure it opens correctly. Step number 6, the final step of modifying your donation v2 wide HTML file or a specific donation page, if you're making all of these modifications to an existing customized donation page, is to locate the payment information section at the bottom of the page. Back to this is where using that little find tool in the editor is really helpful. Just type in payment information at the top. That should take you down to this section. A little trickier for the momentum theme if you're editing the momentum theme because all of the text is translated, but it's the same idea. There's going to be a payment information section at the bottom with that payment field card liquid code you see in green directly under the words credit card here. You want to make sure that this whole section is deleted from your existing template. If you leave it in here accidentally, you will notice that the express payment options don't load on your new form. The new form will not work if you have that payment field card liquid in your template twice. So make sure you delete this section at the bottom of your theme. So these are all the changes to the Pages Show Donation V2 wide file. You'll want to save and publish these changes when you have made them and when you're ready to test your page. If you save these changes as a draft, that's fine, but know that when you go to preview these changes, you will not see the express payment options. Google Pay, Apple Pay, and the Pay Now button will not show up in preview mode. They'll only show up on the live version of your site if you have those configured in the browser configurations that Katie mentioned at the top. So if you have Google Pay set up on Chrome, you have Apple Pay set up on Safari, you're only going to see those options display if you are viewing a live version of the page. So before or after all those changes we just walked through, you'll also need to make some updates to your theme.scss file. These are much more straightforward because you can essentially copy and paste all of the code from the EPO theme.scss file that you'll have downloaded again from the documentation into the bottom of your theme.scss existing theme file. So you can either do that as a straight copy and paste from EPO theme.scss, or you can use, you can import the EPO theme partial. So the way you do that is you just upload the EPO theme.scss file under the Files tab of your existing custom theme, as you see in the screenshot here. Select the file to upload EPO theme.scss, and then include that @import EPO theme snippet to the very bottom of your theme.scss file, and that will load in all of the code just as though you'd copied and pasted it. So whichever version is easy for you, just make sure you have all of that theme code in your theme.scss file before you view the file. So the last step here is to save and publish the theme changes. So whether it's copied and pasted or you use that @import, make sure these changes are published. Likewise, you're not going to see the changes if you are viewing the theme in preview mode. The nice thing about the theme.scss changes is that they will not affect any other pages. So if you want to put this into your theme.scss file, even though you're only using express payment options on one particular donation page, that's fine. The rest won't be affected by the changes. So you can go ahead and feel pretty safe about adding these changes in here. And you will need both the theme.scss changes and the donation v2 changes in order to see the functionality work properly. Just to underscore that, this isn't something where we recommend that you kind of piecemeal try each section and save it and try to view what it looks like, because it's going to be a bit of a mess. It will not work properly without all of the code from both the donation v2 file and the theme.scss file in place.
Thank you, Lauren. That was amazing. Admittedly, we know that this is technical, right? Like, so if you need help, if this is not your forte, if you don't have someone on your team, we do have professionals within our network that are willing to help. So I'm dropping a link into the chat now where you can hire someone. Maybe this is a great opportunity for you to update your whole website as a whole, or maybe you just want some help with this page. We also have NationBuilder experts that are willing to help. So Blake very graciously gave out his information. So if you are like, I just need this done, I don't have time for it, it's way above my head, feel free to contact Blake. He is already an expert, knows what he's doing and how to help you with this. So those are some resources for you, along with, again, we're going to be sending out this recording. And so we're definitely going to open it up to questions. We've got some time. We've got about 20 minutes. Again, I do just want to kind of reiterate that this is going to be a time for general questions. I've seen some really great questions come into the chat, so we're going to definitely dive into some of those. But again, we will not be able to pull up Your Nation live with us right now. I know we have some folks like Sally coming in and being able to help with some of those really specific ones, but we're not going to be able to share screens and kind of go line by line into the code and with themes. So please keep that in mind. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone's faces, and so we can kind of go into it, but this is still recording so that it's useful for folks. So we can dive in. I'm going to go through the chat first and answer some of the questions that came up there if they didn't get answered already, just to make sure. So it sounds like Madeline, I'm not sure if it's Madeline or Madeline, asked a question. If we can turn on the express payments with the button to turn it on across all donation pages, we do not need to create a new donation page just for express payments, correct?
So if you've turned on express payment options, you don't need to create new donation pages to see it, but you will need to make those theme updates that we just walked through if you're using a custom theme. If you're here and you're using a stock theme currently, you've not made any customizations to your existing website theme, then you should just be able to click on the button and everything should work. You should be able to use these express payment options. So kind of a nuanced answer to that, but let me know if you have follow-up questions there.
Can I ask a question on that, Lauren? So if a stock theme, no modifications, no template on the page, I'm still ending up with the page ends with the pay, the pay for, it's cut off, right? And the only difference is that we've implemented the capability of the cookie bot thing to deal with the international payments. But are you aware of any other any factors that might affect that? I've been talking with the help desk for a while.
So it sounds like you're seeing the form and it just ends at pay with, and there's no information showing up below that.
Correct. And the credit card doesn't appear. I mean, literally, it stops right at pay with. And if that's too specific, I don't mean to derail the group. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most common reason I've seen that is if you have customized the page and you still have the payment, like the old payments information section at the bottom there, like I mentioned, deleting that out. It sounds like that's not the case for you if you haven't customized anything. I'm happy to sync up with our support team after this, Brad, and see if we can dig into that, but I'm not sure what's going on without looking at your specific page.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Catherine had asked, is there any step-by-step documentation for the conversion for those who are already using NationBuilder as a payment processor?
So Catherine, please let me know if I'm misunderstanding here, but the express payment options documentation is separate from just setting up a NationBuilder payment processor. If you already have the NationBuilder payment processor, you can just jump right into following the express payment options documentation that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, that was an old question. Got answered by the presentation.
Awesome.
Great. Sorry, I'm just going through the chat, so I apologize. It seems like another question is, if you don't have the payment systems on your own system, is there an easy way to check if they would show up properly? I see someone else asked if we could send links into the chat of it already working, so you can kind of see that experience.
Yeah, I can send a link into the chat. It's a demo site we have, expresspaymentoptions.nationbuilder.com, and you can see the functionality working here. However, if you don't have Apple Pay or Google Pay set up on your device, you are just going to see the regular credit card field version. So you'll see the pay with section at the top and the credit card field section underneath it. Unfortunately, there's not really a great way to test it out if you personally don't have Apple Pay or Google Pay set up. What I noticed myself is that setting up Google Pay on Chrome is pretty easy and straightforward. So you can go ahead and set up a Google Pay account on your Chrome browser on your personal computer and just make sure that it's working. And if you see Google Pay, that means it's also going to be working with Microsoft Edge. It's also going to be working with Apple Pay with Safari. So as long as you see any one of those buttons, either Pay Now, Google Pay, or Apple Pay, it means it's working across all three. Apple Pay is a little more complicated to set up, particularly on a desktop device. So I would, if you don't have any of them configured yet, I'd recommend that. Or for Microsoft Edge, that's an example of a saved browser payment method. So if you have Microsoft Edge, you can add a credit card into your Microsoft Edge browser and try it out there. And that's just kind of a one-step setup process. They just need your a credit card set of credit card information in the browser itself.
Thanks, Lauren. Bob had asked, would working with a clone donation V2 be appropriate for testing mode?
So cloning your donation V2 page and then customizing that page to test it out, definitely would recommend doing that. If you want to try it out and try out the changes as you might have them on an existing template, that totally works. A bonus there, if your donation V2 page is using the donation V2 wide file from your site level theme, it's not customized at the page level, and you clone that or you create a new donation page off of that, you can make all of the changes to a specific donation page. And then once you're sure everything is working, you can copy and paste that into your site level theme file. So that's a good way to make sure that what you're setting up on that one page is correct, and then implementing it on the full site, since you aren't really able to effectively use preview mode for these changes. So good shout out, and definitely would recommend that.
Amelia had asked, we're just getting started and nothing's getting set up and all of that jazz. Do we have to do all the customizations? Great question.
No, you are safe from those customizations. You can just go ahead and turn on the feature. If you're using a stock theme, it should work for you out of the box. So you just need to enable express payment options at the site level. That'll make sure that it's turned on for all pages. If nothing is customized, you should be good to go.
Catherine had asked, also, Catherine, I see your hand raised, so I'm not sure if this is the question you want to ask or if you have another question in addition to this, but my question is, what's on the dev roadmap for this feature already? You mentioned working on releasing documentation for staged donation pages, but what else?
So we are releasing that documentation soon. There are no immediate additional features planned for to expand on express payment options, but we are looking for feedback. So if you feel anything is missing or isn't working the way that you'd want it to be, please send a message into help@nationbuilder.com. All of those get passed through to our product team, and we'll be looking at those and looking out for ways that we can iterate on this.
Thanks, Lauren. Jordan had asked, what are the fees for those other options compared to credit card? Is it the same percent?
It is the same percent. So excellent question. We treat Apple Pay, Google Pay, or Pay Now exactly the same as we treat a regular credit card transaction. So all of the fee structure that applies to credit cards applies to these new payment processing options in the exact same way.
What other questions, folks? Just calling out, Tyra, I see that you asked that we send this out immediately after. The second that this downloads to my computer, I will make sure I send out the recording. So I totally understand wanting to get this set up as soon as possible. So definitely will do that as quickly as I can for everyone.
Oh, and thank you, Sally.
Yes, thank you, Sally.
Brad. Appreciate that.
So Catherine had asked a question to me about Blake. So I put Blake's information in the chat. And again, I will send out the deck, and there's going to be links to all of the documentation at the right places. And, you know, Blake's information will be in there. So what's he's going to charge? I have no idea. So that depends on each expert. So you'll have to reach out to him and find out. It depends on like what you're asking for, if it's one page, if it's multiple pages, if it's a whole site, like, so it really depends on the project size. So I don't know, to be completely honest, but I know that he's there to help.
Bob, I see your question here. If patrons will still be able to elect to pay the fee edition, there is a separate separate documentation about how to allow donors to pay the payment processing fee. There's a checkbox that you can add. That's not part of this rollout of express payment options. So that's not included in the code that you'll be downloading here. That's an additional customization. But that documentation does exist, and it has been updated to match the express payment options functionality. So if you've already customized your page to include that, you either have the option to do these express payment options customizations around it, or if you're just planning to upload the express payment options code like we talked about in those first two options, you can go ahead and overwrite that earlier change and then go back in and re-implement the donors covering fees checkbox functionality. So that's those are kind of the two options there.
Another question that I've heard come up from customers, and I think Annette, who's another one of the enterprise account managers that's on the call, has also heard, is does the information that the organization receives about the donor change in any way? And maybe it also might be worth talking about the transaction types in that as well.
Yeah, so great question. We are treating these in the same way that we treat card transactions. So you will get the exact same amount of information about the donor that you would have otherwise received. Also, because the donor has to verify their information before clicking the final submit option, that means that any custom fields that you have showing up on your donation pages, or any required fields that Google Pay and Apple Pay won't have, like employer and occupation data, those fields are still going to be available on your forms if you have them set up and if you have them required, so that donors can fill in all of that information. So you won't lose any information about the donors if they submit their transactions in this way. And we've added Google Pay and Apple Pay as payment types. So if you want to see who's used Google Pay or Apple Pay, you can filter for that in your finances section. It'll also show up now in your payouts exports as a final column. In your payouts exports, you'll be able to see the payment type, be that card, Google Pay, or Apple Pay. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see if someone's used a saved browser payment method. That's just going to show up as a credit card because we won't know based on how the transaction is processed that it wasn't a regular credit card. So again, those three options are just going to be Apple Pay, Google Pay, and credit card, but you'll be able to filter for that data as needed.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So that's awesome. Will had asked, are express payment options available on all countries? I don't think I can use Apple Pay in Mexico, or at least I couldn't the last time I tried. So will this be available for people like them?
So unfortunately, we as NationBuilder don't have control over the countries where this is applicable. So if Apple Pay can be used in a particular country, then it should show up on the form. Like if they have it set up, again, like Apple Pay in Safari, if they have an Apple Pay account in another country and they use it on the form, it'll show up there. If they don't, it won't. So that functionality is controlled, I believe, by Google Pay and Apple Pay themselves. And then we have this additional layer that the NationBuilder payment processor is powered by Stripe. And so we're using the Stripe feature through them. So not a specific answer, but kind of more generally, we don't have control over where it works. It for sure works across the US, or where Google Pay and Apple Pay and Microsoft Edge are available.
No problem, Will. Great question from John. Does the new donation page still trigger a donation webhook? Is the payload the same as the old payload?
Yes, great question. And yes, that should be the case. So it should be exactly the same as it was for a credit card.
Tyra asks, can you add the PayPal code that can be added as well to this documentation?
I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically, Tyra. If you want to unmute and elaborate there, I'm not sure what you're looking for.
So I know that we can also include PayPal as one of our payment providers. At least I saw that in the support document somewhere. And I was hoping to not have to look at 3 different things, but just have them all in one place. Like if there's some discrete code, if that could just be added to the end of it. If you want PayPal, do this too.
Got it. I think I can clarify what you're seeing there. So PayPal was a third-party payment processor that we had made available prior to the rollout of NationBuilder payments. So it's actually been several years since we were truly supporting that as a payment processor. Now, if you've been with NationBuilder for several years and you've had a PayPal account, we didn't delete that or remove that in any way from your account. So you may still be able to use that again if you had it before the NationBuilder payments processor was released. So that's actually a different functionality and a totally different payment processor than the Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Pay Now functionality. So it's not, PayPal will not show up as one of these buttons. It can actually even be used on a donation V2 page. If you do have a connected PayPal payment processor, because you were using that I think 4+ years ago with NationBuilder, and you have a donation V1 page set up to use to that, you can link out to that page in the content of your donation V2 page if you'd like to, but it's not tied into this functionality.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We've got 5 more minutes before we have to wrap. So if there's any other questions, I think I answered all of the ones that have come into the chat so far, but if I've missed you again, I'm so sorry. Please feel free to put into the chat again so that we can make sure you get covered, or feel free to unmute, but we got 5 more minutes left. Totally, Catherine. Yeah, Lauren, thank you so much. If there's no other questions, we can wrap a little early. Again, I just want to make sure there's enough space for people to ask the questions if they need to and get those answered so that you can implement this as soon as possible. But if not, we can end early. There aren't any plans to run a second session live at this time. If it's going to be helpful for folks, feel free to please just give us that feedback. And, we could potentially do that, but there aren't any plans at this time. And again, we'll send out the recording as soon as possible. Highly recommend, you have the recording up, you have those documentation up with the explanation of changes, and you're making more of those go out. We will make sure that all of that gets addressed. If you have additional questions when implementing, please reach out to our support team. You can email them at help@nationbuilder.com. That's going to be best way to answer these really kind of complex theme questions. I know it might seem like, oh, I can just call them and talk to them. It's going to be really hard for them to do that live, just like it's really difficult for us to do that live because it requires us kind of going in line by line and kind of really taking the time to analyze and kind of check it out. So it might seem counterintuitive, but they will get to you more efficiently if you email them at help@nationbuilder.com. So please feel free to email them if you have questions on that. As far as the stage donation page information will be available, Lauren, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but
Yeah, I can speak to that because I'm currently testing out those changes and making sure that they work. So that holds is on me. I'm hoping to get it out today, but if I find any issues with those kits and that code, then might be releasing that on Monday. So if that code is ready and in good shape by the time that Katie's sending out her follow-up email, that information can be included in that email, and otherwise keep an eye out for it early next week.
All right. I think that's as good a note of any to end on. So again, I will send this out as soon as possible. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy your weekend. Bye, y'all.